Okay, well, I'm pleased to introduce everybody, but I'm especially pleased to introduce Dave Ivan, one of the first people I met when I came here to MSU a number of years ago. I've had an extension appointment going back to 1986 in both Missouri, Iowa, and now Michigan, and I'm very proud and pleased to have that appointment. Dave is Institute Director for the MSU Extension Reading Institute. Dave, take it away.
Thanks. There we go. We're way ahead of schedule, so that's a good thing. Not that I'm looking for additional time. I'm going to be pretty brief. You know, Rich, you did a nice job in terms of actually stacking these presentations. Because I think as we talked about networks and how networks function in different ways to advance community, it's so apropos in terms of the work that we do in Extension. And I'm not going to share some research with you because I'm not a scientist. And I appreciate what Catherine and Matt shared relative to their work. But their work is very relevant to our work. And our work at the Green Michigan Institute, which is part of MSU Extension, is to take that research and distribute it to community. And so often there's questions in terms of a name and how does a name capture what an organization does or what an entity or a unit does, and a lot of confusion in terms of the Green Michigan Institute. Are they an environmental advocacy group? Are they looking at distributing funds and green dollars? What is it that they do? I think at the essence of what we do at the Green Michigan Institute is working in community and working in the environment, and looking at the interface and the interaction of those two entities. And so we bring, hopefully we bring, the work that many of the scientists, both here at Michigan State and other institutions across the country, have relative to advancing communities. But we try to work in a variety of different areas through work teams to help facilitate positive change. Our challenge, as the challenge of many extension outreach activities, in terms of how do we connect our dots? How do we, at the end of the day, make sure that what we do is seamless, that what we do actually advances community, and perhaps most importantly, that what we do addresses the grand challenges facing the state of Michigan? Because at the end of the day, that's what Extension is charged with doing. In terms of looking at those societal challenges that we're facing and how we can add an educational process and work shoulder to shoulder with the communities using networks and other approaches to help address those challenges. It was funny, I was at a conference actually just yesterday in the Northeast, and I won't mention the institution, but their tagline is, for a lot of the work they do is community challenges, university solutions. And I was kind of struck by that because I thought how wrong that is. Because it's not us to kind of shoehorn our approaches, our quote, university solutions to their challenges, but rather to look at it from a very grassroots perspective, and again, work shoulder to shoulder with the communities, often leading from behind versus leading from front, working with those existing networks, those existing organizations, those existing nonprofits to help address those challenges facing the communities. So we're not going to use that tagline. But what we do is work in a variety of different buckets to help advance those communities. And at the end of the day, what we're really dealing with is change. And how do we help audiences deal with the changes that they're facing? Whether that change may be climate change, what may be changes relative to aquatic environment, the terrestrial environment, different changes that we're facing in the natural environment, as well as the built environment. And the key is, how do we connect what we do from a change perspective, not only in the natural environment, but also that human and built environment. And looking again at those changes from local food perspective, and connecting our work with governance and community vitality and economic change. And hopefully at the end of the day, we work with these communities and understanding how that change impacts them, and identify through an educational process those pathways with dealing with those changes in a positive, meaningful way for them. At the end of the day, for us, it's about sustainability. And it's that sustainability that underpins all of our work. So that it's not a quick approach. It's not a blow in, blow out, blow off type of approach. But rather, how do we develop a systematic set of approaches that are going to serve that community, that are going to serve the state, address those grand challenges, that's going to sustain time, and do so in a meaningful manner. And so it's a sustainability perspective that underpins so much of our work. And so as Matt talked earlier in terms of his work and Catherine's work, in terms of looking at different approaches from a very systemic perspective, we work hand in hand with those individuals. Whether it be at the UP Research Extension Center, where Matt and Dr. Roundtree works closely with our staff, whether it be at Tollgate, where we have a number of different staff. At the end of the day, we have a collection of staff that are working in this arena. We have about 70 field-based educators spread throughout the state that interface with community, that are part of that community network, that live in that community, in those communities. Meet our clientele at the grocery store and understand what it's to be a part of that community. We also have about 30 academic staff here on campus that we invest in. Those 30 academic staff are distributed in 5 different academic units. So it provides really a unique multidisciplinary perspective in terms of working with economists and social scientists and geographers and others, so that as we look at these grand challenges, we know that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but rather a collective approach in looking at the expertise that we have to address those challenges. So I'm looking forward, as the Institute Director, and my staff, who I want to do a shout out, I'm sure there's many of them, let me look right in the camera, that are watching via Zoom, hopefully. I'll check the roster later. No. What I want to do is challenge all of us in this room, in terms of many of you are scientists. Many of you perhaps have an extension role. Some of you may not. But how do we connect our work in a meaningful way with those staff that are located in these communities to allow us to, again, address those grand challenges? So I want to thank you for the opportunity, and be glad to answer any questions that you may have. Okay. How does the Greening Michigan Institute engage other MSU institutes to address the range of food system challenges? Great question. I think when we started on this journey and we reorganized, I'll be honest, we perhaps became pretty compartmentalized. We kind of operated in our silos because that's easy, right? It's easy to kind of do our work and kind of have a little bit of a hedgehog approach and not kind of stand up and look around in terms of saying, all right, who else is doing similar work, or how can we connect? But fortunately, we kind of got our sense about ourselves, and we're doing a much better job in terms of looking across the institutes, across the organization, and hopefully across this institution, MSU, and saying, all right, how do we triage, how do we bring together our various resources in a meaningful manner? And so what we are doing, I guess purposely, is bringing together our various work teams, and specifically our work team leaders, together to say, okay, let's kind of lay out our plans. And where are the interfaces? Where are the connections that it makes sense for us to very closely collaborate, or at least share information? And then more importantly, where are those areas that we're not operating in that we should be operating in, and how do we do so in a very multidisciplinary perspective to allow us to address these challenges more effectively? We can always do better, Rich, in terms of making sure that we're not in silos. I think that's common in any organization. But what we're trying to do is set the table, so to speak, and encourage our staff to work very collaboratively with their colleagues in putting together their plans of work, and collaboratively with the researchers here at MSU in advancing their work. Another question?
I think that's all we got.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.